Hi, good afternoon, everyone. We are going to talk a little bit more higher level here about how prepared or not Southern California is for the climate whiplash across many different kinds of infrastructure systems. Just a little bit of background. I'm Ted Bardacke. I'm CEO of Clean Power Alliance. We are the preferred energy provider for 36 cities and 2 counties across LA and Ventura counties. I'm also, these days, I get voluntold to do lots of things. I'm on the Blue Ribbon Commission for Climate Action and Fire Safe Recovery, working with the county, as well as the LA 28 Games Energy Council, which is responsible for all the delivery of power and to all of the games venues and associated things. So I'm super excited to be here with people who have been in the trenches in climate emergencies, and we're going to talk about some lessons learned. First is Mark Pestrella, who is the director of Los Angeles County Public Works, and then a slew of other associated agencies, whether it's floods or transportation or emergency management. Public Works has sort of responsibilities across water, transportation. I think I'll get your 6 divisions: water, transportation, environmental services, construction management, development services, and emergency management. So if there's a climate emergency, in the county, Mark's gonna touch it. Next we have Zach Swank, who is the Deputy Director of the Boulder County Office of Sustainability, Climate Action, and Resilience. And we're super excited to have Zach here because I don't know if folks remember, but in 2021, there was a huge fire in Boulder County, the Marshall Fire. And many of us who are working on rebuilding are taking a lot of lessons learned, not just from what happened in the Camp Fire, not just what happened in Santa Rosa, but also what happened in Boulder. And Zach's going to share some experiences there that hopefully we can have some lessons learned. And then Brian Jordan is Senior Vice President for Global Growth at Hill International, doing infrastructure, again, across various ranges. Brian, some of you know, is a real leader, has been a real leader in water, and I think that's an area where we have a lot to learn from in terms of climate planning. So I'm going to kick it off and ask Mark. I know you've just ran from the watershed, but Mark, you are in the trenches, but I'm going to ask you to step back for a moment and say, and give us some lessons learned, and in particular, too, what do you wish you had been doing to prepare? Like, now that you've seen what can happen, what do you wish you had been doing to prepare ahead of time that you hadn't done? Like, where was the gap? And then now, with just these 3 months, but looking forward, what are you going to do different in terms of preparing for climate extremes? So what do you wish you had done, and what are you going to do different going forward?
Well, thank you, Ted. And it's funny for infrastructure people. I've been at this for 38 years, and I've been trying to make infrastructure sexy to people for a long time. Just been trying to sell it. And, the old saying, never waste a perfectly good crisis or emergency. That's true. Ted, well, first I have to say, because I know a lot of my staff are in the audience too, but I have to say we've done a lot of good shit. I'm telling you that I am as proud of our agency as I have ever been. And I think that's probably because this isn't our first rodeo. We've been through a lot of fires. I've been through a lot of fires throughout my entire career. My first real urban wildfire was Topanga in 94 and 94, 95. And we had a little thing called an earthquake there too at the same time. And then, through the years, our agency has been perfecting our role. What we did right many years ago now, maybe 10 years ago, we really started looking at our capacity to serve regionally. instead of in silos. So we've been pushing a lot of regional initiatives that paid off during this event. One is the county water plan has been a really good thing for all of us in terms of assessing the vulnerabilities of our water systems and prioritizing what we need to invest in with resiliency in mind and sustainability in mind. And that came to fruition. It also was furthering of the valuing of relationships between agencies across LA County. For those of you that are not an LA County resident or work here, there's 88 cities in the county. It's over 4,000 square land miles. It has a tremendous amount, 10 million people live here. It has governance structures for every special district and for the cities on top of that. So what we've been working on is like trying to have a communication system across them, both data sharing as well as just relationship sharing across them, and that has come to fruition and been very advantageous to us in this scenario. What I would do more of is that relationship building, because it does pay off. And what I wish we would have had, and what I think we still need to think about, is we need to have mutual aid agreements across at least the public works sector. And all infrastructure sectors need to have stronger mutual aid agreements with each other so that we can ignore the boundaries, the political boundaries that govern us, and allow for us to help each other out in these times of need. And that mutual aid also would let us look deeper at like the integration of our systems. So water systems, you know, are notoriously separated by the districts that they run, both from governance standpoint, but also physically distant. So for example, Las Virgenes Water District we are currently working on, I wish it would have been in play during this fire, working on an intertie between the two agencies so that we can supply each other water during an emergency. And you probably heard the stories about the mutual water agencies within Altadena, where they are mostly acting as separate entities, each of them. And most definitely, if they had a better intertie with each other, physically and also governance-wise, they probably would have done better in this event. So more collaboration. Just to give you a sense of it, Ted, just and I'll let it go here, 16,000 structures destroyed, something between $250 and $275 billion in damages. Most important number, and very sad number, 29 fatalities. And I have to wonder how many of those lives could have been saved by more collaboration. Not only between the infrastructure agencies, but also our first responders, and having the agencies know what we're doing and having worked out strategies for evacuations, for fire suppression, optimizing those physical systems, just the knowledge of where a system is and what it is. One firefighter not knowing where a valve is can cost you so much time. And so I just think that I just hit on it. There's just so much to do, but what we could do more of is create more collaboration in the form, as I said, of mutual aid would be one of the things. We never imagined the amount of debris that we would have to move. We're going to move 4.5 million tons. That's half the total waste thrown away in a year in LA County. So about 11 million tons a year are actually, which is a crime in itself, are put in landfills. But then now imagine another 4.5 million tons on top of that having to be disposed of. The relationship with the Army Corps of Engineers has proven to be really good. So I would just keep doing more of that, despite me hating to work with the Corps, or the federal government, I should say. One thing I'm kicking myself now is, for a long time, and I worked in a building department in our department, so I can say this, I was the assistant superintendent of building, ASOB. When I was there, I was working on business process systems to improve the way we permit, because there's multiple agencies involved in permitting. Lots of good ideas. We achieved a lot of things, uniform codes between City of LA and County of LA and the other jurisdictions, things like that. But still to this day, there is too much bureaucracy in the issuance of a building permit. That's partly because they put too much regulations into building permits, the state, other agencies trying to have us catch everything in building permits. There's just too much. And the lack of reliance on private sector is a problem too. That's the other part of that equation. We really do need to start trusting professionals and holding them accountable for the licensures that they hold. So the ethical responsibility of a licensed engineer, architect to build something safe and lean on that. So I had an opportunity 3 years ago to do something about that, and now this time around I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to create a self-certification process for permitting that should cut down, and then use our own plan checkers to train the professionals and to actually inspect the work. That's what we're working on now. So some ideas from the world of Mark. And let me just say this, our mission in recovery is recovery with resilience, with an equity lens. That's the other thing is, we've known about the burdens and the benefits of the infrastructure we have in LA County, and we cannot continue to repeat. So we are, sure as hell, as soon as the fire came, there's an equalizing factor of the fire. It knows no zip code. It doesn't know your economic status. It just treats everybody the same. And when that happened, you can see the burdens that our lack of infrastructure or poorly designed infrastructure is having on, which sadly enough is those that typically get the worst service from government. So we do have an opportunity to straighten that out through our recovery.
Great, thank you. Zach, pick up a little bit on that. I think Mark mentioned sort of pre-planning, getting collaboration across different jurisdictions, but also pre-planning with people. And talk about the experience in Colorado and the Marshall Fire, and sort of what did you learn about that preparation that we might be able to take some lessons learned from here in Los Angeles?
Yeah. So 3 years ago, we lost 1,100 homes in Boulder County. It was one fire event, but it affected 3 communities, unincorporated Boulder County, the city of Louisville, and the town of Superior. Collaboration is definitely key. There was a lot of good collaboration between the municipalities that really paid off. But as Ted alluded to, preparation is also key, and there are some very stark differences in outcomes that resulted from preparation or lack thereof. So in unincorporated Boulder County, we've experienced 5 major fires in the last 15 years and a 100-year flood. And so we have a permanent disaster recovery office. Many years ago, we put in place a component of our land use code that gets automatically triggered whenever there's a disaster declaration. And so that streamlines permitting automatically. That's just already written in place. We don't have to, figure it out on the fly. And it also creates a pathway for how homeowners can make requests of changes, of exemptions, depending on, was it a flood, was it a fire, was it another event, and what's needed to recover quickly. The other 2 communities, the city of Louisville and the town of Superior, have not, fortunately, have not experienced much disaster as the rest of Boulder County has, and they didn't have that in place. And so what happened after the fire was we had, in unincorporated Boulder County, we had an orderly managed process where residents could share their concerns, what they wanted out of the rebuild, the issues they were having, and, if it wasn't the right time, Boulder County staff could say, yeah, hold that thought, here we're on step, AF, and we got to get down to 2G, but here it is, it's all in the plan, and we're gonna get to this issue. Whereas in the city of Louisville and town of Superior, there was no orderly process for getting that feedback and making changes. And so we saw protests against energy efficiency codes in Louisville, which were less stringent than the ones in unincorporated Boulder County, where we saw no protests. And the city of Louisville got pressured into rolling back their energy efficiency codes. And a big part of that is we had, the plans in place of exactly, how we were going to manage this process, having been through it before, and we were able to communicate to that community. There's a process for all of this, and it resulted in very stark outcomes. Another example is city of Louisville granted an exemption for sprinklers in houses. Boulder County did not. City of Louisville and town of Superior debated passing more home hardening measures. This was a wildfire after all, and they were not successful in that effort. Boulder County passed home hardening across all of unincorporated Boulder County after the fire. Again, without much community pushback, which was sort of the opposite of what we had in Louisville and Superior. And keep in mind, this is one fire event, neighbors living across the street, in these communities, and just can't underscore enough the pre-planning, so critical not only to the outcomes, but also to the public's perception. Again, we had protests in Louisville, not in unincorporated Boulder County.
Interesting. It reminds me that, one bit of collective work we have to do is sort of get it into people's heads that disasters are coming. And let's prepare to rebuild before the disaster comes, which I think is what Boulder County did. It said, yes, a disaster will come, another one will come after that, and here's how we're going to rebuild, and defined how we're going to rebuild. I kind of liken this a little bit to the strides we've made in Southern California in drought planning, because we know there's going to be a drought. It might be this year, it might be next year, because we've gone through the cycle and society understands that there's going to be a drought. And so we have drought contingency plans, and when the map turns red, we flick the switch. We haven't done that for fire yet, but maybe we should. Brian, you come from the water space. That's just one example of something we might learn from water for these other climate problems that we're having. Can you think of other examples from the water space where I think we're probably the most advanced because of our history with drought that we might be able to learn?
Yeah, when you think about, if you look back over 100, 150 years, water systems, urban water systems were created to bring water to a city for health and living, but they were also brought for fire protection. So if you Google any old city's name, there will be a Great Fire of Chicago, a Great Fire of New York, a Great Fire of London.
San Francisco.
San Francisco. Some cities have had it happen multiple times. And about 100 years ago, cities started realizing this infrastructure that was being put in place for human health could also be used for other things. And the number of massive urban fires declined, partly because of that, but building codes and other things that came along. And then around World War II, the insurance industry came along and said, hey, we have these minimum fire protections if we're going to provide insurance on your house. And now, if you look at your typical homeowner policy, there might be a discount if you live near a fire hydrant or something like that. You might pay a little bit less for your insurance. And that's largely how we built water infrastructure. We looked at what fire flow needs are to put out a house fire, put out a building fire, or protect a block or something like that. Same thing, the building codes were designed that way. We're now at a point where maybe that's not enough. The events in Louisville, the events in Lahaina, the Camp Fire, Paradise, now Los Angeles. There's been an unfortunate series of very dense events that I think will make us need to rethink what that investment's going to be. But it's not going to be a wholesale re-infrastructuring of the water system. That's just not cost effective. It's not practical. But at the same time, some of the topics Mark highlighted. Could we have more interconnections? Could we have more local storage? That's fairly low-hanging fruit. The other observation I would make is just looking at other market sectors outside of water and other types of natural disasters. When a hurricane's coming in the southeast or East Coast, you hear about it days ahead of time. Luckily, you have time to prepare, but it's top of mind for everyone. The transportation infrastructure can literally be turned around in about a quarter of the country to evacuate large zones very quickly. When you think of constant tornado events in the Midwest and those tornado sirens and the way we have the National Weather Service alerts set up for people to go to their basements or to go to safe areas, if you're in that part of the country, it's very top of mind. Out here, there's earthquakes. There's the Great Shakeout. A lot of us, public agencies prepare for that day. They have that day. Kids at school know when it is. Businesses have to prepare. We don't have that for wildfires, and it makes me wonder, given the scale, the enormity, not just in dollars, but in lives now. Nearly roughly 100 people died in the Paradise Fire. People died in Boulder. People died here in LA. Dozens of people died, Lahaina. It just makes you really wonder if we need to work with the public and put the wildfire risk at the same level and think about not just the water infrastructure, but the transportation infrastructure as well. Part of the reason why so many people died in Paradise, if you recall, is they got trapped on a road and they couldn't get out. It just became too dense for them to come out. We had the same problem on Sunset here in LA. If schools were in session that day, if more people were at work, we might have had a much larger number of folks that were injured or lost their lives or whatever. So do we need to start thinking about where the bottlenecks are in our transportation infrastructure, and do we need to design them for evacuation? But the private sector can either help you with resiliency or we can help you with recovery. We can't help you when the disaster is going on. And the recovery sector, the recovery market for the private sector is unfortunately much larger than the resiliency. We make pennies on the dollar compared to what we do with recovery. And Mark highlighted it. Most of the money we make is right at the beginning of the natural disaster, getting rid of debris. That is a very big business in the recovery sector. Us and other private sector companies helping clients get rid of just massive tonnage of debris that happens immediately after. And then you have this long tail of spending on mostly capital projects of rebuilding and resiliency and whatnot. Whereas just like spending on insurance, if you paid us to help you take best practices and take lessons learned and think about resiliency through a different lens, it's literally pennies on the dollar compared to what you spend with recovery.
Interesting. So you all, in one way or another, touched on the issue of governance. Lots of, either in Zach's case, a different approach to, how thinking about disaster among a different county and a couple of cities. Mark, obviously, you live in the world of governance. I will stipulate in LA County, we have a lot of government, but maybe not a lot of governance. And I think we're starting to break through those barriers. But I will say, talk a little bit more from your various experiences about this paradox. Because on the one hand, one of the reasons we have a lot of government is we like to get institutions down to the smallest level, because those are the folks who do the best at communicating with people. And so you want to have as many sort of institutions down at the local level. However, that can create problems of coordination and problems of when there's a real problem or a disaster, somebody has to take charge. And so can you talk a little bit about sort of that push-pull? Because I think having that local government is really key to the great shakeouts and the water the water savings during a drought and all of those things that we've started to institutionalize among society is best done at the smallest local level. And yet the climate emergency seems to me needs to be sort of looked at a much more macro level, and we haven't found the right balance.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, because I do really believe in, I start out with self-reliance.
Okay.
Our own governance at home, and personal responsibility. And I think that's what people like in small. What I've found, I live in an unincorporated area, and I do like the fact that it's live and let live there to some extent. So although there is a zoning code, it's pretty broad. But I know too that I think what you touched on, there needs to be a blend of both for sure. Localized, because I think that's where the most effective help comes from at the localized level. But I think too, you touched on it, you kind of stole my thunder, is like the scale of what's happening with climate. It's calling for a more regional, or at least a virtual regional governance. And that's where I was bringing up this idea of like mutual aid and mutual understanding. We have, again, in LA County, speaking about water, we have the LA County Water Plan. We have the Infrastructure LA, which was started by a number of people in the room here, which is really honoring everyone's autonomy and authorities, but at the same time realizing we need some form of virtual governance that gets us into agreement on what's best for the communities we serve. And so some sort of prioritization based on the scale of the issues. So if anybody's in doubt that climate's a major issue, I mean, you're not living on the face of the earth right now. I mean, it's a major change to how it's forcing change at a scale that most people can't handle at the very, very local level financially, emotionally, your mental health impacts are tremendous. When this much uncertainty is created by the events that we're experiencing. So your question was like, I've always said that, let's talk about water, that one of my favorite lines at the beginning of a speech on water is, the problem with water is governance, because there's too many people, too many hands in it. But, and how we've responded to that is, again, helping each other, working through those things, and having a collaborative approach to things, which fortunately and unfortunately relies on people's motivation. You know, what they're into the government, being in government for. Are you there for the altruistic reason of helping others, which is the stated purpose of government. So, but that's not necessarily how people always act. And so when an agency sees they're overwhelmed, do they raise their hand? You know, or do they kind of hide because they don't want, because the ego gets in the way? I can tell you this scale, this incident was so large, it's the first time I ever raised my hand and said, we need help, truly need help to deal with the significance of what's happened. Now, I've just voluntarily said we can't do things alone, and as a person and a public official for many years now, I promote asking for help whenever and at all times, and even talking about your vulnerabilities. Does every jurisdiction do that? No, and that is at the cost of human lives. The greatest sacrifice, the thing that I don't sleep about at night is, if we didn't known, could you imagine how many lives we could save if we had known each other and actually had governance that was fully cooperative and fully sharing, and the laws, by the way, and the laws that encouraged that kind of sharing, that kind of sharing. So, yeah, I mean, welcome to the United States.
Great.
Yeah,
Zach? Yeah. Go ahead, Brian. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I was just going to add, you know, sometimes you just can't work around the governments or the governance. So you got to do your best to streamline things. And Mark Gold is here. I think a lot of you may know him or know of him. He's one of the most dedicated environmentalists you'll meet. He's on the blue ribbon panel that's been assembled by the county to look at the recovery efforts and you know, specifically the water-related issues. And he was just commenting about how one of the fundamental issues that they found in their initial findings is the need for homeowners to harden their house, to manage their vegetation. The problem is, if one homeowner doesn't do it, then the entire network of what you're trying to manage falls apart. So in that case, do you add more government or more governance to make the homeowners do it? Or do you say, we're going to go on the other side of the fence, and as a government, our governance is going to be to manage that wildlife-urban interface where the wildfires largely occur and they spread to that urban area. And when you hear one of the most dedicated environmentalists out there say, you know what, we can trim that further back, we can take that wildlife area and we can use some of that to manage this and hopefully prevent that in the future. Not only does it speak to the awareness of the problem, the scale of the problem, but it also speaks to this question you were asking is, when is government effective, when is governance effective, and when does it get in its own way and we have to say, okay, we don't need to add more government or governance, we need to work within what we have and find ways to make it more efficient and work for us.
Great, thanks. Zach?
Yeah, following up on that and a theme from earlier, you know, the Marshall Fire started in the grasslands. It wasn't a forest wildfire, but it could, well, actually one of the ignition sources was somebody's backyard. So, like, one of our challenges is that we have this anchor of past experience, right? We're familiar with the frequency of fires that we've grown up with. When I was born in Boulder County, there were 15 high fire risk days a year. Now there's 100, and it's projected to be 200 in the next 5 years. And that is not something that we're good at conceptualizing, that change, right? You know, we're like, sort of like the example earlier of, you know, treating this like drought management and having that sort of preparation in place. The Marshall Fire happened, there was 100-mile-an-hour winds. It could have started anywhere, but in dry conditions and 100-mile-an-hour winds, stuff is just going to burn. and that those conditions are going to happen more and more. So, it is unfortunate in Boulder County that only one of the 3 communities passed required fire resiliency measures in the rebuild because I heard some discussion earlier today of with LA it was not a question of if but when, and then now where else, but it's really about when again. Like there's nothing stopping Boulder County from burning again this year, LA from burning again this year, unfortunately. So we need, back on the governance theme, it is a fine line to walk of, you want to allow flexibility where you can and allow people the freedom, live and let live where you can. And at the same time, we need governance because the general populace doesn't recognize we are already living in a very different and altered world from what we're familiar with, and that simply requires a different response.
That's great. Well, thank you. I've served 2 goals here, I think, that I had. One is to get Verdexchange back on time. So we're going to wrap up. David, I see you enjoyed that one. And the other goal was to get a couple of engineers and an MBA to start talking about social science and political science because that's what they live through every day to get their really important work done. So thank you, Mark and Brian and Zach and the rest of you for sticking around. And we're back on time, David.